With all the bad news coming out in decentralized spaces lately, there is a question that just keeps popping up in NFT circles again and again. Is it too late to launch an NFT project? It's a really good question if you consider some of the direct impacts against NFTs themselves that have recently come up. So we're going to answer that question today by looking at the status of the market, understanding why this is happening, and finally, what you can do about it. My name is Trent Kennelly. I'm a Web3 marketing strategist, and this is the best place for you to learn about Web3, NFTs, and how to market it all. So if that sounds good to you and you're excited, make sure that you like this video. Subscribe to my channel if you're into it. Comment to let me know how your interaction in the NFT space might have changed in the last 2 months or so. I would love to kind of see how that interaction goes from my audience as well. I would love to hear about that, but until then, let's get started. Okay, so first let's talk about the status of the market. What is the deal? Where are we now with this thing?
What's happening out there? Shall I describe it to you?
Well, a few things have happened lately that are kind of throwing a wrench into this whole system. First, OpenSea has seen a trading drop of 99% from the highs that it was experiencing in 2021. Basically, almost everybody that was using OpenSea at some point in the last year just stopped. Now, this is not specifically an OpenSea problem. I mean, if you look at the trading volume for Magic Eden, for LooksRare, and many, many others, you're gonna see that same downward trend at around the same time. And as a result, the Bored Apes and CryptoPunks have seen up to a 50% decrease in value due to this drop in overall trading. Now, you may be asking at this point why I picked those two specific projects out of the lineup here. I mean, there are thousands of projects. Well, the reason is that we often look at Bored Ape Yacht Club and CryptoPunks as bellwethers of the NFT market more generally. If they're doing well, we trust that the NFT market more generally is performing well as well.
I'm following them just like you are.
And I'm not saying that trading for Bored Ape Yacht Club or CryptoPunks has stopped completely. That's just not true. It is still trading. There is still a large amount of money flying around. But if we're going to acknowledge that these are big legacy collections that are the bellwethers of the NFT market more generally, we also need to understand that legacy collections are going to do better, and these are legacy collections. So a legacy collection of anything is always going to perform better, right? I mean, if you just look at cars, sure, the car market has its good years and it has its bad years. But even in the worst of times, the cars that are being sold are mostly from big manufacturers that have been around forever, GM, Toyota, etc. It is extremely difficult for anything new to break into the market. I mean, maybe that's a little bit of a tangent, but the point is that these are legacies, these cars, and these NFTs, Bored Ape Yacht Club and CryptoPunks. And if you are a small collection and you're trying to break in, it's not really a good indication of whether the market is going up or down, or at least it's not a 100% clear indication of the market, because these legacy collections just do better. That's just how it is. The other thing that happened, and this happened very recently, is the implosion of FTX. So FTX is a trading platform that hasn't been around for a super long time, but was nonetheless extremely popular. So many people were using it to trade all sorts of currency. But of course, there was a problem, which is why it crashed, right? So FTX was facing what is known as a liquidity crunch. This basically means that they didn't have enough liquid assets, like cash, for example, to cover potential losses from all of their open trade positions. Think of this like making a $50,000 bet when you only have $500 in your pocket. If you lose, you can't cover that $50,000 bet, so you are in a liquidity crunch, okay? It's the same idea with FTX, except they don't have to worry about getting their finger smashed. And because the platform was so popular for trading, that implosion has dragged the entire crypto market down with it. Now, as I'm making this video, that drama is still unfolding pretty rapidly, so it's hard to know exactly where we're gonna land. But we can at least make out that Binance tried to bail the exchange out by offering to buy them, with the ulterior motive, of course, being to restore confidence in the markets more generally so that it's not taking this big of a hit. But even that hasn't worked, and we're now hearing that Binance is pulling out of the deal because FTX's books are terrible. So this isn't really a great situation. We're not really sure where we're gonna land. We're gonna have to see where that happens. But for now, we can see that as a result of FTX crashing, that market is again being pulled down. Now, the question you might be asking yourself after I've gone through all of this crypto news is this: Trent, we're talking about NFTs here, not crypto. What has this got to do with anything? Great question. And the answer is that this has everything to do with NFTs. Consider that NFTs are tied to blockchains. Blockchains are the basis for cryptocurrencies. So NFTs must be tied to cryptocurrencies, right? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, which means that if crypto goes down, so do NFTs. So what's happening on the crypto market is absolutely vital if we want to understand the effect on the NFT market more generally. Okay, great. So with those two causes, the NFT crash and the crypto crash in our back pocket, let's talk about why this is happening, okay? And a partial answer to this question is something called the hype cycle. So the hype cycle is something I talk about in a lot of detail in this video. We're gonna kind of go over it a little more briefly right now, but let's just kind of get a quick definition. So the hype cycle is something that all new technologies go through. It looks like this, and what you're seeing is a graph that tracks the path in terms of user adoption for every new technology ever. Every technology has a starting point that leads to a huge excitement point that then tapers off and then kind of comes back over time. So before we explain this further, it's important to get a really quick understanding of these different elements. So let's go through that really quickly. The first section is the innovation trigger. So this is simply the starting point. Somebody finds and starts to market a new innovation, which is quickly followed by the peak of inflated expectations. This is a period of hyper excitement about the technology. It leads to a huge amount of people adopting it. Everything looks great and like this tech is going to last forever. But then comes the trough of disillusionment, where people decide that they don't want to be involved in this tech anymore, they don't believe in it or whatever, and so they leave, which finally leads to the plateau of productivity, which is more or less this slow growth curve that takes the technology from its lowest point and builds on it more slowly, more sustainably, until it just becomes a part of what we use every single day. So Gartner tracks the hype cycle for emerging technologies, and what they have found is that NFTs are on this clear downward path. They're well past that peak of inflated expectations, which means that in a lot of ways, that sudden dip that we're experiencing right now is normal and expected. And I know that that's not necessarily soothing, but it does help us to understand why this is all happening. And now that we have all of that context, let's come back to that original question. Is it too late to launch your new collection? No, it is not. It is undeniable that the usage has dropped and that the drop is pretty enormous. But when you see people are still paying 50 to 100 ETH for some of the biggest NFTs, you can see that there is still money in the game. The market is not dead, the market is distilled.
It deals in knowledge distilled from down.
And this is kind of another way to look at that hype cycle for new technologies. Let's take the hype cycle, but change it around so that we're looking at user groups. What you're gonna see is that it starts out with true believers, that innovation trigger, that beginning to ramp up period. Then everybody joins, then people who aren't diehard start to drop off, and then you're left once again with those true believers. Maybe you have more than before, but you still have a core group of true believers. And from that point forward, you're just growing that base of true believers until you get to something that's more massive. So there is no doubt that the market is still hungry for new projects. There's also no doubt that there are sales to be made here. It just comes down to understanding this distilled market a bit better. What are they looking for? What's going to draw them to a project, etc. This ultimately comes down to providing a unique project that's going to push the NFT space forward more generally. And there are a few specific areas that you can focus on to make that happen. So let's take a minute really quickly to talk about those before we go. The first way to have an impact here is community. So I talk about this a lot in this video, which you can check out. But when we're looking around at the communities that are thriving today, they are full of people who really believe in and love their projects. It's not a bunch of people who are just there for a quick buck anymore, right? So finding ways to engage your community and make them part of the process is more important than ever before. A great example of a community that's doing this really well is Mush Gang. So I've been following these guys for a while, and they've been doing a great job of not only making the community excited to be there, but also involved in the process of growth. They make it really clear that they're not a rug pull and are constantly looking for ways to bring value to the project. Yes, it's fun, but it's also a group taking this process very seriously. They want everyone in this project to find value, not just a couple people at the top who created it to get their money and run away like a rug pull, right? Next is utility, which I talk a lot about in this video. The idea behind utility is that you want to give people a reason to be interested in your project besides the art itself, and in some cases, in spite of the art itself. Frankly, even for the most diehard NFT buyer, there are so many options that it's just super easy to get swept up. It often results in what's called a paradox of choice, which is a psychological trigger that happens when you have too many options, and it leads to people just not making a choice at all. You don't want people to not make a choice, you want people to be drawn to your project and make a decision for you as opposed to everybody else. So you need to find a way to stand out from the crowd, and helping people understand what what they're getting besides the product itself can be huge for this. A great example here is IMPT. So they took the idea of carbon emission offsets and they made NFTs out of it. Now carbon offsets are tradable, which is helping carbon emissions across the world. So this is the kind of utility that's going to capture attention for a huge group of people. In this case, it's going to be the environmentally focused sub-niche of NFT users, and it's going to get them to want to be more engaged and taking more action in this space. And finally, uniqueness. So again, paradox of choice is going to keep most real people from choosing your project, or in some cases, any project, right? So you want to really stand out from the crowd, which probably means that breaking away from what has become the standard NFT look of a shoulders up avatar of an anthropomorphic animal with a collection name like Lazy Lions or Wussy Wolves or something is really important. You want to stand out from the crowd, and to do that, uniqueness is paramount. So there's the verdict. It is not too late, but you do have to shift your mindset from my project will sell out to I need to reach the right audience the right way. I hope that kind of helped you to shift that mindset a little bit. Let me know whether you've been engaging in NFTs in the same way lately, or if something has changed in the last few months. I would love to know what your perspective is there. Otherwise, please feel free to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you're into it, and I will catch you in the next one.